Thank you very much. So before I actually start, who of you actually has heard of Hypercerts before? Right, quite a few. So it might be a little bit of a repeat for some of you, but since not all of you have heard it, I will also try to start at the beginning. And my talk will basically explain what I mean with Hypercerts are a tool to build scalable retrospective funding systems for impact. And I will first start with why are we actually excited about retrospective funding? What do we mean with a funding system for impact or an impact funding system? And then go into what Hypercerts provide to impact funding systems. So retrospective funding, basically very simplistic illustration of the current system from grants. Suppose there are contributors and funders who are contributors as projects. There's some grant, the contributors do some work and produce some impact with that. There are obviously some delays in that. And then sometimes we see impact reports on this, but oftentimes we don't actually have a really good mechanism that evaluates the real impact of the work that was produced. What we think helps with this is a more retrospective aspect to the funding system in general. And this is where we think Hypercerts can provide value from the beginning. So Hypercerts are created by the projects right at the beginning with kind of an impact claim describing what they want to do. Funders then fund the Hypercert, which basically also means that they get awarded part of this Hypercert as kind of accounting for their contribution to making this work happen. So then basically the same thing, they create the work and they produce the impact, but then there is kind of, we introduce another loop to this. Evaluators observe after the fact the impact, so you can think of a similar thing as an impact report, but importantly, they create the impact evaluation that actually signals to the funders something about the impact that then leads to another decision to fund the impact afterwards. And funding the impact afterwards is important because this gives new incentives to contributors and new incentives also for prospective funders. And I will go into that a little bit more in a second. Evaluators actually have another role here to play because evaluators can also be prospective evaluators. Think of them as scouts for new promising projects that also can help prospective funders. So those are kind of scouts as evaluators, and we think of auditors as kind of helping retrospective funders making this second decision. So why are we excited about retrospective funding? We think from the perspective of the retrospective funders, there are a lot of fields where it's really difficult to actually anticipate the impact, and it is so much easier to get to understand what the impact was afterwards. Of course, impact measurement is not easy afterwards as well, but it's easier. And especially for a lot of projects, they really need to be completed to really produce the value that they intended to produce in the beginning. So it's that's why there's a bridge here, because half a bridge is not half as impactful as a full bridge. Then the second thing is that we create incentives for high potential public goods. So because it's retrospective, we can actually increase the rewards for the contributors based on the impact that we really observed. This ideally leads to two things, that more talent is actually attracted to this system because now the more impact I create, I actually benefit from my own talent in this, and hopefully more talent doesn't go into the next SaaS building, SaaS startup, but into public goods. And the second thing is that the contributors, while they are doing their project, they also have more incentives to really produce this impact to get more rewards. And the third thing, recurring income streams. So if you really have Hypercerts as kind of capturing the impact that you create, and you can sell those Hypercerts over and over again, then you also can use this as a tool for recurring income streams. There are also already like some existing retrospective funding mechanisms. Don't go into detail here, but like price competitions can be part of the social impact bonds and carbon credits. Carbon credits, the challenge there is like it is only for a very specific set right now. So you can think of Hypercerts as trying to expand this idea to any other impact vector. And you have price competition and social impact bonds that have currently high transaction costs to set it up. So Hypercerts kind of try to lower the transaction cost for this and making more retrospective funding systems happen. So an impact funding system, I spare you like all the details, but just like the way we are thinking about it is that there are different actors, different funding mechanisms, different coordination mechanisms, and there's a goal that is fairly specific to the domain, how we really think about the impact in this in a certain domain. There are specific questions that we really should focus on, like how do we really work on the most promising, most impactful projects? How do we get the best talent and the best with the necessary resources to this sector, to these projects? How do we incentivize them to do the best work? And how do we then create recurring income streams? How do we create sustainability for those projects that really showed that they can provide impact? The characteristics that we want to see is that impact funding systems should be dynamic. They should be dynamic because the conditions for it will change over time, and that's why the funding system has to adapt to that. Decentralization here is also important to use the private information in a funding system. Different funders, different experts have different information, and bringing that all through like a central decision mechanism is not as efficient as actually having a decentralized decision mechanism there, similar to like a market. And it should be interoperable, basically in order to make happen like the dynamic and the decentralized aspect of this, because different funding mechanisms should be able to come into this system. Different funding sources and evaluations should work together, and it shouldn't be like that we create like different silos for this. So when we think of different funding mechanisms, there are different decision mechanisms that decide how we actually like distribute the grants or the retrospective funding, and we should also experiment with a lot of different decision mechanisms on that. There are also the funding objects differ if we actually can measure the impact or the outcomes, or if we are just funding the activities themselves that we hope that they have an impact. And like for different kind of funding objects, we need different funding mechanisms. And this is why I show this slide, because for all of that, we think of Hypercerts as a data layer below that. And a common data layer for this enables kind of more experimentation with decision mechanisms, because we are using kind of the same set of objects that we decide over. And we think of this really that we want to build in a modular way. That's why we try to build this data layer that also other projects can use in their own funding structures. So now, what are Hypercerts, and why do they enable this system? So a Hypercert really accounts for the actions that are expected or supposed to be impactful. So it is the data fields that we capture in a Hypercert is who does what when, and what is kind of this work supposed to impact, in what time frame, and what rights do owners of this Hypercert have. And really this is kind of then like an impact certificate, but a Hypercert is just like a specific implementation of an impact certificate. And that makes impact claims identifiable, traceable, and transferable. These all kind of live in an impact space where here I just show 2 dimensions, the scope of work and the time of work. I will go fast over this, but we really think of these 6 characteristics as building really a space where different Hypercerts can live in, and we can also operate like operations on that. For example, we can merge them together if they are part of a larger project, or we can then split them if we think, oh, they are actually part of like some different things that make sense to funders and to other like collaborators in a different way, and we want to like combine them and split them again, or just like the way we characterize all of this work. Importantly, and in difference to like a lot of other implementation of impact certificates, we have like the Hypercert really just looking at the work. And then separately, we have the evaluations that kind of point towards the Hypercert. And that enables a more open evaluation system because different people can provide different evaluations, and they can even contradict each other, so that over time there might actually be more reputation building from evaluators, so that we can improve the system over time. And here, basically, when we have those, just like an impact certificate that tells me what the impact of something was, the Hypercert just accounts for the work, and then I can myself, as a project, can say, okay, this is what I think is the impact of this, and then different evaluators can also provide evaluations. And that's kind of the more modular fashion that we want to see Hypercerts, so that like different evaluations and different evaluators can improve on the methodology. So this is not all just theory, we also are building. We have a pilot app that is available at hypercerts.xyz to create Hypercerts, and an update of this is kind of like a little bit of this is live already, but it's updated continuously. An important thing is also that Hypercerts allow to be fractionalized, because so much about like creating impact is about collaboration, and different funding sources should work together. So we can have one Hypercert that is split in 3 fractions, for example, if we collaborate, like there are 3 collaborators or 2 collaborators and 1 funder, that gets like 10% of the impact claim that the Hypercert represents. But we also can think of like more crowdfunding aspect, where there's maybe like one funder that took like the most part of it, and then a lot of people from like from the crowd also participated in this, so we can fractionalize it as we like. Technically, we are building on the 1155 standard. We actually have experimented a little bit with a different standard, the 3525, for those who have heard earlier presentations of this. We define kind of what a Hypercert is and what the fraction idea of that is to really allow this fractionalization based on a certain Hypercert. The claim data is now mostly moved off-chain, meaning on IPFS. We will implement collision checks, because in the hyperspace, impact certificates or Hypercerts shouldn't overlap, because then 2 Hypercerts would actually claim the same impact. And if you have funding, that would basically be the same problem as like a double spending problem. And we also enable multi-chain support, so that different contracts on different chains can use this standard, and we all map those into the same impact space, such that we don't have like a double spending problem from like different chains. So this is what I really mean as like Hypercerts as a data layer, so that on different chains for different mechanisms, so you can just exchange a Hypercert for a grant, but you can also use it for like more sophisticated retrospective funding models. There it is especially useful because it really captures the impact claim over time. That's why we are really excited about retrospective funding mechanisms, but it is also useful for all the other funding mechanisms. It's not specific to that. What is next is that we release a protocol on mainnet, probably on 1st of February. We will have a first pilot to create Hypercerts. The announcement is coming soon. We also would love then to hear a lot of feedback from various projects. Over the last month, I have been in contact with many of those that I see here in the audience, if that's DCEL Foundation and DCEL Labs, or OPSI or lateral. So there are a lot of projects where we would like to hear feedback. Is that something that is useful for you? Or how should we move kind of your feedback back into the protocol such that we all build on kind of the same thing to bring also more transparency to the funding. If we can analyze where the hypercerts, can we connect this with roadmaps, with tech trees, with discourse graphs, to really analyze an impact, the funding aspect of an impact space and an impact area, and then building kind of an implementation of an open evaluation system that basically just means how we submit evaluations of hypercerts, but at the same time allow the methodology itself to be decided by evaluators themselves. And then we are thinking about building in a specific impact area the system that we think is the appropriate for an impact area, because we really think that based on the hypercerts, there are verticals where there's really a lot of specificities to make it happen, to work with the funders, with the projects, to make the incentives work for that impact area. And we are thinking about building that ourselves in 1, 2, or 3 impact areas, but then also collaborate with a lot of other projects to make it happen over a larger set of impact areas. And that's basically the explanation of why hypercerts are a tool to build scalable retrospective funding systems for impact. Thank you very much. If you want to stay in contact, if you want to join the discussion, there's a Telegram group where we make all the announcements, where you can also ask some questions. We have almost 300 people already in the Telegram, and we would also love to have your feedback. And if you have projects that might want to use this, please also get in contact. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, we already have hands up. I was about to say we've got time for maybe one question. Where's the box? Does anybody have it? Otherwise I can pass you the microphone. I'll just pass in the microphone.
Hey, thank you, Holger. This is really promising and fascinating for us. We're big believers in the potential of these hyper certificates. There's one point, one elephant in the room that I'm really curious to hear your take about. They all need to occupy discrete space within this hyperspace. How do you plan on implementing the collision detection?
Mm-hmm. So I think actually the challenge about the collision detection will be some kind of a common ontology that you need in order to know what is similar and what is not similar. But in the beginning, I think it is something where the ontology itself needs to emerge. There's no central entity that says oh, this is exactly how it should be. There can be something around funders or multiple funders coming together and saying this is kind of the ontology that we use for our funding, and then if the projects adhere to this ontology, then we can check if the projects that use a similar scope of work, for example, if they overlap in some kind of an have some overlap of the hypercert. But then in the beginning, what I see is more that similar to a program telling you that 2 pictures look very much the same. Do you want to delete one of them? There is some aspect of kind of the evaluators looking at this. A algorithm tells you these hypercerts look very similar, and then actually some experts say these are actually different, or I will get back to the projects and really check if they are different or how they should be recreated to not overlap.
Okay, so imagine you have correlations between 2 hypercerts, right? Let's say it's a 20% overlap. They would need to be reminted, or the new one. Is it a restructuring of an existing hypercert, or is that there's a gating mechanisms preventing the mint of the new hypercert until that conflict has been resolved?
Yes, good. So that was basically the reason why we first had all the data of hypercerts on chain, because we implemented such a system where directly before you could mint it, it would check if there's an overlap or not. We have other practical reasons why we moved it now off-chain, but because it's off-chain, we cannot, like it's not technically feasible at this moment to do the check before it's minted. So we can actually have project or like hypercerts that overlap, but we could also see that we just like run automatically every like half an hour an algorithm that would check the off-chain data and then submits automatically an evaluation to the hypercert that is a duplicate of something else. So you have like a little bit of a delay, and you have both hypercerts kind of on-chain, but then you have an evaluation that will tell you, oh, this is it's a colliding hypercert, and the later one would be marked.
Super. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.